Hello and welcome back once again to the Inquisitor podcast with me, Marcus Kauke. Today, my guest is Kyle Gray. Kyle is the founder of the Story Engine. He's the host of the Story Engine podcast, and he's also a creator. I'm always curious, Kyle, actually, what is a creator? I have to ask.
I see myself as an artist. And before, thank you so much for having me. And thank you for creating this amazing platform. And I got my start as a storyteller, communicator through, I believe, being a singer-songwriter and wanting to write music and make an impact through my lyrics and make really unique songs. From there, I ended up putting a lot of pressure on myself and deciding that I wanted to travel. I learned other languages and learned how to express myself in many ways, but never really thought that any of these skills were any good as a business owner or entrepreneur.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Go.
It took several years of listening to podcasts just like this one and sitting and waiting for the perfect idea that had no competition, that was going to be an instant success, that I could just put into the things right away and it would go. And after about 2 or 3 years of doing nothing, then I had around 2 or 3 more years of terrible business ideas, which is part of the creative process. But yeah, I would see fundamentally being a creator is being an artist. And I continue to express myself through music, through video, through writing, through storytelling, and the magic that comes from precise communication.
Thank you. Well, look, today we're going to be talking about communication and precise communication and powerful, influential communication. What is the purpose of communication? What are we trying to accomplish? What's the job to be done when we're in a moment of communication? Are we trying to convey a feeling? Are we trying to persuade? Are we trying to influence? What happens when we communicate with people and we misfire because we misread the situation? Part of good communication is listening deeply, being present. It's also being able to read the moment. It's the employing of your empathy skills. Empathy is not just understanding. Empathy is the transfer of emotion, of feeling. It means that I feel what you feel. I see what you see. I hear what you hear. And you know that, and you tell me to your satisfaction that you feel that, or you communicate and convey that. And too often, as sellers, we're very mechanical, we're very process orientated, we're very selfish, outcome orientated. So today, I'm hoping that what you're going to get from this session is a sense of agency and control by understanding how to structure your communication, how to build communication and story frameworks that allow you to convey important moments, important messages, and enlist your customers. Instead of trying to convince them, have them feel like they want to be part of this narrative. So without any further rambling from me, Kyle, would you mind giving us a couple of minutes on your business history and how you ended up developing the Story Engine?
Absolutely. What a great setting of the stage for this conversation. This is a really important conversation. And the smarter and more experienced you get, the more important it is for you to hear this, and the more dangerous the pitfalls we are going to discuss are for you. I have been working in storytelling and strategic communication for over 10 years, or just about 10 years now. I got my start working for a startup, and I was creating content for them, telling the story of their growth while living and traveling around the world. And it was a really challenging thing as a new greenhorn entrepreneur fresh out of college to learn how to write good articles that were not graded by a professor, but graded by Twitter and Google, and read or not read by business owners who didn't have a lot of time, and really needed some real solutions. And that was the crucible that I refined this work in and became known as a good writer. After working for this startup, I started offering my writing skills and consulting in other organizations. I worked for a self publishing company for a little while and learned how to write books and started writing some of my own books. And things got really exciting when I found a company that was helping people speak from the stage and share their stories and teach from the stage and use this as a predictable, effective strategy to grow their business. And as they started to scale up, they needed people to help facilitate their workshops and train people in these arts. And I was the first person they would call because I was doing a lot of the writing for them and I was learning about their processes
Right.
and methodologies. Alongside working with this company, I was building my own agency. I had a team of stay-at-home moms, which I think is one of the human resources gold mines of this last decade, and had stay-at-home mom copywriters and web developers and designers from across North America and in England. And right before the pandemic happened, I was redlining my agency and kind of hiding behind the skills that my team provided instead of standing in my own value. And I wasn't the best manager at the time. I had a lot to learn. And fortunately for me, the pandemic shook things up, and I ended up deciding to right size my team and just cut it down and really own my own skills as the storyteller that I am. And from there, I began another thread of this is throughout my travels in South America and Southeast Asia, I came down with an autoimmune condition that started with really poor gut health. That
Oh,
probably
man.
happened when I swam in some Peruvian waters and got a bad parasite, and
Right.
then had some crazy antibiotic, and then cascaded into what this ended up doing to me is I had crazy knee pain. My jaw felt like it was going to fall off my face, had really bad headaches and fatigue all of the time. And no matter how many Tony Robbins books I read, I couldn't feel better. Damn it. And at one of these workshops that I was facilitating for speakers who wanted to become more speakers, it just so happened to be filled with health and wellness experts. And I sat next to this one woman who said, I help people overcome chronic autoimmune conditions through gut health. And I was like, wow, so your people must want this. They try and do this, but that happens. She was like, oh my gosh, you need to come work with me. When we started working together, she started walking me through her protocols, and I started helping her communicate her value in a new way. And she had a series of problems that I now see are present in everybody that I work with. She was deeply, deeply immersed in her expertise. She had many multisyllabical words that most people would never understand and would run in the other direction if they started hearing. But it felt good for her to say and share all of those things because she was hanging out with other health experts and health nerds at the time and couldn't quite tell the difference between what somebody needed to hear or in the context of marketing or sales and what somebody who was their client or her peer would. And I had been deeply experienced in this. So by asking questions and challenging her and providing friction, we were slowly able to get to the ideas and frame them in a way that was getting more results for her. We were able to put this into a book that I ghost wrote for her. We were able to write keynote speeches, and we were
And
able
this
to
is
put
the
together
story engine book.
no, that is not. I wrote that for myself. She wrote a book, or Ghost. I wrote a Ghost wrote a book for her called Seven Steps to Heal SIBO, which
All
is
right.
small intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
All right. Okay.
Through this process, I had a transformation in my own story. This autoimmune condition that had led me to considering taking my own life because I didn't think I was going to be able to ever get better or get out of this situation. Now became something that really provided a lot of uniqueness and value to my life. It set me apart from being just another copywriter to being the storytelling expert, especially for those in the health and wellness space. And once I had access to my own biological health, I was able to start rewriting my mental health, and I finally had access to that. And this is where the real magic and kind of the weirdness comes into play, is that the same techniques that I would use to help somebody craft a powerful story from the stage are the same techniques that we use on ourselves to create opportunities or limitations in our own lives and to make meanings of things. And more, the people that I work with, though they come to me to write great speeches, they come to me to create great content that attracts attention and gets results. The magic that happens when we get clearer on these stories and clearer on the meaning and the why, and helping them finally be able to express it in a way that conveys it and lands in the hearts in the same of their ideal clients in the same way that they feel it in their own hearts. It creates a transformation and they start to behave differently. They make different choices. They see more opportunities. And this is what really is lighting me up about the work that I do these days. I love making people money, but the absolute changes and directions of their life are is really what gets me excited.
I can get that completely. I had a client, well, I've had a few clients in the last week or so talk to me about the life-changing impact of the work that we do. And the words, coming out their mouth are, "It's made me a better person." How can that not move you? Absolutely get that. Can I try and bring this into a practical moment? I'm going through this process at the moment, and I do suffer from talking about the stuff that really interests me. So, would it be possible to maybe spend 10 minutes just giving an example of the process, the framework, so that people can see it? And you can ask me anything, and I'll just respond honestly, because then the audience seems to like it when I take a bit of a beating as well. But
Absolutely.
yeah, so over to you. I'm in your hands.
So, oftentimes, one of our biggest problems when we are teaching and talking is we talk about things that feel good to us, but we don't actually understand what they need and what they need to hear. So, where we want to start is with one of the biggest objections that you face in somebody working with you, or one of the biggest limiting beliefs that would keep somebody from working with you.
Yeah,
Mhm.
this is all very well, but I need to make sales now. This sounds like it's going to take a lot of time and effort.
Mm, a lot of time and effort. Okay. So, what are they doing? What's keeping them so busy? Because they don't have any time.
Well, mostly they're doing stuff that wastes their time. If you look at virtually every sales and marketing motion that has built up, especially in the tech space, but in most other organizations as well, they do things that incur only admin and cost and do harm to the mental well-being of the person perpetrating it, the person receiving it, and damage your reputation. Things like cold marketing is largely an unwelcome interruption with ludicrous failure rates. A 3% digital, 3% click-through rate with a 15% conversion rate means I failed to generate revenue, which is the reason I ran an ad, not because I wanted click-throughs, but I failed to generate revenue 99.9955% of the time. Then all those leads that I didn't close, I throw over the wall to sales, and then they have to follow up 6 to 11 times just to speak to them for the first time. They have to have 14 of those conversations in order to have a first meeting, and they blow 7 out of 8. So you see this ripple effect. And if you
Yeah.
stop doing that,
And what do we do instead?
what we do instead is we think as the customer. What is the job they are trying to get done? And let's work out how we can facilitate that. If it involves us, that's great. If it doesn't, we need to tell them that it doesn't involve us and refer them to someone who can do a better job. We need to be centered around the customer. But everything that we do in sales, in traditional selling methodologies, is geared around the self. So BANT questions, budget, authority, need, and time do not serve the customer one iota. They've never helped a customer understand their situation, understand the options open to them transparently, or advance towards making a good decision well. And if our questions don't do that, we fail them.
So what we're doing here and how we can start with is a lot of the times people will want to start with, here's what you should do. Here's
Right.
what we are going to do. Here are the things. And we've given a few statistics and different things. I think you've done a fairly reasonable job at presenting the problem. But unless we can overcome the idea that I don't have time, there's no amount of talking about the solutions and the
Absolutely.
statistics that are it's going to go in one ear and out the other. Because I'm just thinking, Marcus is going to make me do more stuff. I don't have time.
And you're making a really important point, which was reinforced on a recording we did with Charlie Green last week. And he makes the point that credibility is the least influential or important factor in the entire trust equation. And it's the one thing all professionals fixate on.
For sure. We have to explain all of the acronyms behind our name. And we think that telling a story is basically reading our business resume. And they have to know all of these things in order to trust us. And we end up giving away all of our power and scaring away all of our customers by doing this. And really, what creates credibility faster than anything and better than anything is if you can truly describe what the problem feels like in their language better than anybody else can. And if we can start to do that, which in this case is time, hey, I know how difficult it can be waking up in the morning, and the first thing before you even open your eyes is there's 6 things that you need to know, need to get done. And you have a hard time maybe falling asleep at night because you're worried about all of the things you haven't gotten done. You're rushing from one place to the next. You're not present at dinner with your family because you're constantly thinking about the next day. When you're at the office, you're always thinking about the future and the things that you need to go. You're rushing every which way, and you're wondering how long you can actually sustain this. But if you feel like if you slow down for a second, if you stop to take a breath, if you so much as blink, everything's going to fall apart. And I'm here to tell you, I know how that feels. I've been there too. And with a small change in how you do your sales and how you do your marketing, so much more is possible, not just in results that you can get for your clients, but in the quality of the life that you live. Wouldn't it be nice to actually be present with your team, with your clients, and with your family, and maybe even with yourself, as unbearable of the person as you think you are?
Well, again, what we're tapping into here is the way the brain likes to operate. The brain doesn't, it moves away from the pain. If we spend our life getting the client to think about their pain, it's one of the associated memories that they have when they think of you. If, on the other hand, we say, look, we have a solution, this is the better future that is open to you, and you can let go of all of those things, and that then frees up your time. But one of the most interesting things is in most sales and marketing organizations, you look at the amount of time that managers spend at work, and often it's 14, 16, 17 hours. Now, when do they get their day job done? Because it isn't during the day. They're doing their day job, strategy, planning, design, coaching, if they do any coaching, rather likely. But all these other things that are really high value in personal time. So what they end up doing is sacrificing themselves for the job. And then they realize after not too long that actually it's a route to burnout, divorce, misery. If nothing else, you're going to take away from today that getting really clear about the story in your own head and the story you're telling about your place in the world, your rights, the boundaries, the things that you actually are allowed to say no to, the things that matter most. That story is critical. So, again, in terms of entering into the buyer's mind, it's vital that we really understand what matters most to the customer. I don't want to derail your process, but I'm sensing that that's ultimately where we're headed here.
Yeah, I have a really great example of what this is and looks like. And there's something I call tasty tangents, which are things that feel good for me to say. And they're even oftentimes they feel good for your listener to hear, but are counterproductive. I had a client named Alex who sells huge offers from stages, both virtual and online. And we were working together. He's also a brilliant Facebook marketer. He makes these long form Facebook posts. And we were creating a presentation with the core promise: you have $250,000 in clients in your Facebook friends right now, and I'm going to teach you how to get to those. And we're starting to lay out the teaching and the stories right here. And he has examples of his Facebook posts on here, and he starts to break down: I wrote this one this way, I wrote this one this way. In this post, I have a video of one of my live events. I have laser lights and DJs, and it is an amazing party at my live events. And I want in this post, I want people to start feeling FOMO about my live events. This is amazing content. People taking notes. He's stoked. Everybody's excited. But is this actually fulfilling the promise of getting $250,000? No, it's not. It's creating another thing I call mental static, which is me thinking about anything other than what is necessary to take action. And now that I'm seeing Alex's laser lights, all of a sudden I'm thinking, man, do I need laser lights at my next event? Do I need to go to Alex's event? Where do I get a smoke machine from? This is no longer serving it, even though it felt good. I'm not moving closer to the objective. And a lot of times, this is the bigger problem here is that we don't understand the process of micro decisions that lead up to enrollment. And instead, we're just kind of, again, where most of the time people are doing this thing called winging it. And they're basically reusing the same presentation or the same set of stories that they made several years ago in an espresso binge, staying up late the night before they had a talk at one of these events. And it performed well enough. It performed pretty good. And so they've been staying with it. They've tried to change it before, and it's only been they tried the changes once, and it was definitely worse. So they're terrified to do anything other than their good enough winging it presentation and relying on their old experience instead of actually thinking about these micro decisions. And so by working with me, I provided friction. I said, Alex, I don't think that people need to know about the smoke machines and laser lights right now. I definitely want to come to the event, but I don't think we need to talk about it right now. And all of a sudden, he cut that out. He was also, I'm sure lots of people do this. If you're doing this, if you're going 10, 20 minutes longer than you should, and you don't even get a chance to make your offer because you're so busy getting lost in your own teaching that you don't get the opportunity to make your offer. But you think because you're teaching so much good stuff that people are automatically going to see the value and come running your way. but only if it's oriented to shift their perspectives, to open up their mind to opportunities. It's not about teaching how to do something. It's about explaining what to do and why it's important, and more dismantling the beliefs and the roadblocks that are in their way rather than giving us the specific steps to do that.
Okay, so can you give us a framework of outcomes and objectives that we're trying to accomplish in the course of that process?
Yeah, I have a simple set of, for a single teaching point, we want to start with, again, an objection, a limiting belief, a problem. And this is different than the problem of the whole presentation or the solution. This is just related to this one specific teaching point. And so we want to talk about what the problem is and why it exists. And then we just want to teach one thing to open their minds up. I'll give you another example of this. One of the health coaches I worked with was a woman who was releasing a book called Fix Your Period. She helped all kinds of women fix all kinds of period and hormonal problems. And we were creating a signature talk to invite people into a group coaching program when her book launched. And I said, okay, what do we need to do to start fixing our periods and our hormones, Nicole? And she's like, well, the first thing we need to do is fix your blood sugar. I know 12 ways that people can fix your blood sugar, and starts listing them off, blah, 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 all the ways. And I'm like, whoa, hold on. I know I'm not a very convincing customer of yours, but let's pretend I am. Now, I promise I will do with my whole heart just one of the things, the 12 things that you have to share, but it has to be the easiest. What is that now? And she goes, well, that's chew your food more. But that's boring. I just said it all. I just, like, what do I have to teach on that? There's no science. There's no this or that. How is anybody going to want to work with me if I just tell them to chew their food more? And I say, wait, Nicole, well, let's actually think about this a little bit. Because if I have these problems and I'm listening to a health person like you, it's very likely that I've listened to 12 or 13 other people, tried things, and they haven't worked before. And I've probably tried to diet before, and that's a real pain. And I don't have the willpower to do that anymore. And now all of a sudden, Nicole comes along and tells me that all I have to do is chew my food more and I can start to get better results. I don't have to change my diet. I don't have to do all of these things. And in fact, as you're talking about chewing your food more, I can actually start to imagine myself being healthier, being more successful right in the seat while you're talking to me. It doesn't have to be something that I have to go and implement and do a lot of things. I'm starting to feel better and starting to feel like there's hope just from listening to you. And this is how we want to calibrate our teaching. And this is the feeling. We want to open them up to possibilities. It's not, you don't need to diet more, and there's of course a big balance here. We want to show them that it's easy. And we also want to say, but you want to have a guide with you. There's 12 other, there's 11 other ways to do this. And we want to make sure that you're choosing the best one for you to get the right results. But now all of a sudden, I see possibilities. I'm excited for the future instead of, this is going to be so much more work. I'm tired of this.
Just to summarize what I'm hearing, take the thing that is simplest for your customer that will help them advance towards and have a sense of agency over the outcome that they want. That's the essence.
I would say the essence is, instead of trying to cram as much possible information into the next 10 minutes, try to think, what's the one thing I could teach on that would open them up to possibilities? It might not necessarily be the simplest or easiest, but what's going to create a sense of possibility instead of more things on their to-do list to do.
And we want to make it as frictionless as possible with the least amount of uncertainty as possible.
there is a certain degree of friction. This is where the finesse comes in, and this is why it's important to work with an expert. And I'm actually doing the same thing that I'm teaching right now.
Yeah.
We want to open them up to possibilities and show them that it's easy. And at the same time, we want to sprinkle in a little bit of, you need an expert to help guide you through this. This is hard. And that's why, because if they just think, oh, this is so easy, I can go and do this on my own, then they're going to leave. And this is equal disservice to them, because they're going to leave and they're going to try and do this on their own, and they're not going to get the results that they could if they worked with you.
Okay. So this then speaks to two possible triggers. One is a conceptual one, which is that as an expert, they feel that their expertise is in imparting the knowledge instead of enrolling people, so that they can pass those skills on and then those people can benefit from it. Because if you're just getting between your prospect and their decision to buy, you're not doing anyone any favor. I think the second important part here may well be around money concept, self concept, your rights. Because it's really interesting when people are consultants or experts in someone else's company, they don't seem to have the same money concept issues that they do when they go and set up on their own. All of a sudden, because they're operating out of their back bedroom or their study, they think they have to charge 1/5 what they were charging before, because they don't have the overheads. But no one's buying your overheads; they're buying your outcome. And it really does come back down to focusing on what really matters most to your audience and imparting enough information to enroll them into believing that actually it's within their grasp. Fair?
Absolutely. Yeah, we want them to believe in themselves, and we want them to especially believe in themselves with you and your process and working with you.
And you've touched on something really important, because one of the single biggest reasons why people object is they just don't believe that it's possible for them. The number of times you'll hear people say, well, it's all well and good, but our industry is different. Yeah, that works in other companies, but we're special, we're unique, we're different, just like everyone else.
Classic.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So
One of our
please
biggest
carry on.
competitors is our not the coach or consultant next door that offers the same thing as us. It is our belief in ourselves. And that's who we want to orient our objections and our challenges toward, are the belief systems that keep us from ourselves, our believing
Well,
in ourselves.
this then actually is a really timely segue into listening, because I've talked my way out of many sales. I've listened my way into a few, and I can honestly say that my customer has always taught me how to sell to them. And the less I make it about me, and the more deeply and empathetically I listen, the more they feel understood and the more open they are. Then they can tell me their story. So I'm really curious about the power of listening and its impact on having your customer tell the story.
Yeah, this is another incredibly important thing that I'm going through my own kind of branding and identity struggle right now, as I have heavily branded myself as the storytelling expert. And the more that I think about it, and in fact, a large corporate founder was reflecting this back to me about reading The Story Engine, which is now a 5 or 6 years old book. And he's like, well, I don't think storytelling, I read the title and I finished this book and I was like, this isn't really just about storytelling. There's so much more happening here. I feel it's maybe 35% of the value that I create. But when you can start to understand the frameworks and the micro decisions, like I said, If somebody's listening to you, there's a series of questions that we need to answer. The first one is, should I listen to you? The next one is, would this work for me? And then the third one is, do I trust you to take me there? There's smaller frameworks and statements and purposes beneath all of these things. And when I like to work with somebody to create a signature talk, in a lot of ways, I see it as getting a white belt in a martial art. There's a series of movements that you've learned. You've learned blocks, you've learned kicks, you've learned punches that have their places in the right moments. And when you can start to see the world in that way, then okay, what are the ingredients for this story that you're starting to listen to the person? What is this person saying to me? And what story could I tell that would reflect that? What are this person's limiting beliefs? And how could I teach to reflect that? And when most people instead are just, they're not even listening to their client and they're thinking, what's the 10 things I can't wait to talk again about all of my stuff? This just ends up sabotaging them because they fire hose the client with the information. And we've already talked about all the problems with that. But instead, now we're listening and we can tell a story or make a statement. And with practice and the magic that I create is you can make a statement with the same efficiency and thoughtlessness that a black belt would block a punch or make these kinds of moves. And I want to be really importantly say that our opponent is not our listener, but our opponent is the belief structures that are keeping our listeners from a better life. Also, when we can start to understand and articulate our own stories better, we start to understand our why and our purpose better. And I think this is very aligned with what you do and how you teach, because I believe that sales is a divine responsibility. If you have a skill set, you better be going out there and trying to find people to help with it. Because if you're so busy, locked in your mind and being caught up in, oh, well, what if they don't like my prices or do this, then you're just thinking about yourself. And there's people in pain. And the pain is all kinds of different pain, but it's the same pain likely that you've gone through and you've experienced and you've found a solution for. And if you're so busy caught up in your own mind about why you are unworthy of selling, then there are people suffering because of this. But if you can get clear on, this is my story and this is why I need to be out there, and you see your process of selling as a service, as a responsibility of yours, it's going to dramatically change how you show up. And it will change how you ask these questions. And it will finally allow you to listen to this person instead of constantly trying to prove yourself to them.
And again, the listening enables you to enter into their story. Well, one of the most important lessons I learned is, and the analogy is the film Finding Nemo, where they're swimming along, and they suddenly hit the Gulf Stream and then whoosh. Well, if you bother to listen to your customers, they will tell you what their struggling moments are. Their struggling moments are an invitation over the threshold and into the heart. The same thing with objections, they're a gift because they're an opportunity for you to say to the customer, would you like to talk about that? There must be a reason why you raise that now. And then they start to open up. And if you can have your customer tell their story, then when you put your proposition together, it's not your words, it's their words. Their language is much more compelling than yours is to their brain.
Absolutely. That's one of the things we miss on the most. And we want to use their language. This is one of the places I start when we want to craft an origin story, for example, which would answer the question, why should I listen to you? And I start by asking, what are some of the biggest pain points that your client has? What do you think their surface level fears are? That what would they talk about with a friend over coffee when they're experiencing these problems? What do you think their secret fears are? What's the thing that they wouldn't care to admit, maybe even to themselves or say out loud? And what does that conversation look like in their head? And we can start, I like to read those back to them. And we know that these words have a powerful impact. And even by reading these words out loud, they can have a physiological effect on us. But we use this as an emotional compass. And I say, when did you feel like that? And they try and avoid me, and they start to teach something because they don't want to talk about this actually painful moment. And I'm like, no, tell me about the Tuesday afternoon where you were feeling this. What room were you in? And what did it smell like in that room? And then we really start to get interesting. And we start to craft and draw out a story. And the story that we want to draw out, or the details that we want to emphasize, aren't necessarily the courtroom truth, which a lot of people want to do, and they want to feel that they need to share every single detail that happened. We want to create a canvas to paint with their words. And it's by using their words in our stories that we start to create the effect that our listener gets a little bit worried that we snuck into their bedroom at night and started reading their journal.
Interesting. Okay, because again, what we're trying to do here is create intimacy. If we look at the trust equation, with credibility and reliability are table stakes, but everyone seems to focus primarily on credibility. They're trying to convince people of why you should buy from me. When I'm buying, what I'm interested in is, can you help me solve my problem? Do I trust you to do it? And if I go with you and things go wrong, are you going to have my back? And what's really fascinating is, if you look at the research on when certain aspects of the process or the buying criteria are important, things like your history, your credibility, your credentials, all of that kind of stuff, they have a little bit of interest at the beginning and then none throughout the buying process. How you show up, how you make that human being feel. Do you feel as a buyer that I have your back? Because if you don't, then I'm really not going to buy from you. I'll milk you for information. I'll be very interested, but I will not part with cash. And I'm not going to put my reputation or my livelihood on the line. So what stories do is they help us to create a really visceral, emotional connection, brain to brain. What you're trying to do is create an unconscious connection with the other person's brain so that they allow you to go from one of them to one of us. So which type of stories are especially powerful at helping a seller to build their credibility in that context and demonstrate that they are a safe pair of hands, that they're leading the buyer openly, transparently?
There's several different kinds of stories that I work with. And like I said earlier, I suffer from these same problems because I think that these stories are maybe 35% of the magic that I really create. But the origin story is exactly what we want to use early on to get them opening to listening to us. And how I say it is, it takes all of the brilliance that's in your head and gets it to finally land in the hearts of those who are listening. And it can also inspire it in yourselves. I'll give you, if I may, another example. I have a lot of health examples, but I've worked with many different people, but these ones have just happened to be the most poignant for our conversations. I was on a call with a health coach who was working in one of my group programs. And she gets on the call. We're going to create an origin story together. And she's like, Kyle, I'm stressed out. I have these women with hormone problems, and I help them and I fix them. And I say, Diane, that doesn't sound like a problem to me. And she says, well, I want to work with parents and their children with ADHD. And I don't know if I can manage focusing on these people and these clients at the same time. And you know what? I just realized a little while ago that I have ADHD. And I'm in my 50s now. And I've been looking at decades of dopamine driven decisions that have led my life every which way. And if I just keep thinking to myself, if my parents had only known, they could have done something. Now, this is not a very good attitude to creatively craft a story together. So we've got to change directions. And I say, Diane, would you like to play a game? And surprisingly, people say yes. And we're off to the races. I say, write down what you just said. If my parents had only known, they could have done something. Write it down, take a big breath, write it down, or say it out loud, take a big breath, say it out loud, take a big breath, say it out loud, take a big breath. She does it. How does that feel? Not good at all. Perfect. We're on the way. We're doing it. Let's change one word. If I had only known, I could have done something. Read, breathe, read, breathe, read, breathe. Okay, better, closer, warmer. Let's change it again. I know now I can do something. Nice. This is something. This is something. And I ask her, what do you think one of the biggest objections that a parent with a child with ADHD would have to working with you? She immediately knows. Oh, well, they wouldn't want to open up a can of worms with the diagnosis of their child. They would rather just ignore it. And I say, Debbie, what does that lead to? It leads to decades of dopamine driven decisions that would lead your life every which way. And all of a sudden, a light goes off in her head. I know now. And that's why my story is so important. And now she's ready to go. And I ask her to tell me a story about somebody in her family that has ADHD symptoms. And immediately she starts talking about her grandson bouncing off the walls and the boy's father shouting at him, trying to calm him down. And they both end up frustrated and exasperated. And she's looking at her grandson. And in his eyes, she sees her own problem. And she thinks about her own experience with ADHD and the decades of dopamine driven decisions that have led her life every which way. And she just keeps thinking to herself, if my parents had only known, they could have done something. And now the most disempowering line that she said was the thing that directly became the biggest objection overcome. So that's an origin story. And I want to segue really quickly into success projection stories, which are very, very powerful and very subtle. These are stories that you talk about the clients that you've worked with, and they give an opportunity. The clients that you've worked with in the past, they present the objections to you in the stories. And you teach through talking about how you worked with a client and created a result with them. And this is amazingly different than a testimonial. A testimonial happens when you say, here's my offer, and Debbie got these results with me. And when we make that, people are skeptical and leaning in or leaning back, like, oh, yeah, sure. Is that a real person? I doubt it. But when we tell in these stories, we're adding value and we're giving little hints about how we work with people and the results we get. And I've done this several times in this podcast, and I just did it with the Debbie conversation that we had right there. And by being able to understand this kind of story, we both can overcome objections when we add value when we're teaching, and ideally we are conveying what we're going to offer. We're going to share what we're going to offer through these stories and the results that we get, so that by the time we actually make our offer, there's no objections of existing, and they already know what it's like to be working with us and what the next steps are. So by the time we make our offer, they're thinking, wow, I'm so glad you said it, instead of, oh, here it comes.
Well, you've touched on a couple of really interesting things that I want to pull out. The first one is that the questioning and the the questioning is outcome focused. And as a result of that, the brain is latching onto a bunch of dopamine hits, which, for your ADHD sufferers, I guess, would not necessarily be the greatest thing. But what it's doing is it's reinforcing a vision of a better possibility, a better future that is within that person's grasp. Even if they don't buy at that moment, in their brain, there is an imprinted memory of that moment where they perceive themselves as having been able to achieve those outcomes. By incrementally taking them through the process. So the Debbie story, taking her from it's all my parents' fault to I have power and agency to be able to do something. You also tapped into something that's really important that salespeople forget. And you mentioned it right at the top of the call, which is that as an expert or as a senior executive, it's very easy to forget what it's like to be a novice. Everything that Kyle has talked about is putting yourself in the skin of the customer. It's about thinking as the customer, not about the customer. Because if you're thinking about the customer, chances are you're looking at it through a selfish lens. And what you're trying to do is manipulate them, coerce them, influence them, pressure them. Whereas if you take them incrementally, step by step, each time they make the advancement in their brain. And they're the ones who come up with the solution because they have the epiphany. That is so much more powerful than you trying to convince anybody of anything. Carl, we're running into the last few minutes of the conversation. Tell me this. Look at the blind spots that people have when, and you've mentioned it often, that the obstacle, the competitor, is the belief system, either the seller belief system and or the buyer belief system. What stories are good in terms of helping create contrast between an old belief system and a new?
I would say that the success projection stories, once again, we take our clients that we've worked with in the past. And again, this is where there's a difference and a distinction between our truth and courtroom truth. But we want our clients to present the old belief systems to us in quotes. They want to say, Kyle, I don't think I could ever sell like that. I for whatever reason. And we also, there's little subtleties that are happening here that we want to coach out. We want our clients to talk to us in quotes and say specific things. We don't say, my client came up to me and they were doubting that they were able to sell this way. We want them to say, Kyle, I don't know if I can do this. There's a difference here, and it has a neurological impact, and it's really subtle. And it takes several tries for me with the people that I'm working with to really grasp what the subtle difference is. But when they can start to do it, this is when we get them immersed in the skin and immersed in the moments, like what you were alluding to. And when we can start to do that, and through our conversation with the clients that we've worked with in the past, we can confront those belief systems and structures in a way that doesn't feel threatening to me as the listener. He's not talking to me. I'm just listening to this other person that looks just like me. That's weird. But had these same problems, and I get to take a walk in their shoes and experience the shifts through them. And since we are right at the end, I would love to share one final type of story, which is a aligned ending story. These are stories that we would use at the end of a great podcast like this, or at the end of a great talk, to leave our audience with the right emotional feeling. And so one of these stories for me is I alluded to a health crisis that defined a lot of my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
And after going through my own transformation, I went to got access to my health again, and I went to a place called Zion's National Park in Utah, where I grew up. It is an amazing canyon with these multicolored rocks. These
Oh yeah,
beautiful
I've seen
panoramas.
pictures. It's amazing.
Gorgeous place. And I wanted to have a little bit of a different experience there. In this park, you have to take shuttles up and down the park, and they're crowded and stuffy and hot, and there's crying babies. But I rented a bike and started riding my bike through the park up and down. And this is amazing. The roads are wide open, and I got to pull off. I saw this herd of deer. I got to dip my feet in the river, and I kept riding deeper and deeper until I found this little turnoff, this little tiny canyon, far away from any of the big crowded shuttle stops. And I hike up this little walkway, and I find this waterfall. It's not like any waterfall I've ever seen. It's gushing right out of the side of a cliff, and there's these green trees, and there's these little ferns and sparkling water that shade me from the hot desert sun. And I'm amazed because I've been to this park many times before. And I look down behind me down the canyon, and I see these stuffy shuttles crowded passing by one. And I realize everybody here, they've come from all over the world to see this park, and they're missing out on this hidden gem. And a lot of you listening, you are just like this hidden gem. And you could make such an impact if you started sharing your story, if you started selling with purpose and communicating in a way that would let the world know that you're out there. And this is what Marcus and I do. We help the world know that you're out there. And so I hope that you, by listening through all of this way, will join me and join Marcus. Leave a review for Marcus's podcast, because this is an incredible labor of love and work of art. And together we can let the world know that we are out there, because I believe more than ever in this time, we need people at their best, giving their best, doing their best. We need them believing in themselves and acting in the highest alignment with their skills and talents. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening in on this.
Well, Kyle, first of all, thank you. You've got a golden ticket, and you can go back and whisper in the ear of the idiot Kyle, age 23, that thought he was immortal, invincible, and knew everything. What one bit of advice would you give him?
Ooh. I would go even earlier and say, skip college, believe in yourself, and start creating. It's been the constant struggle of, do people really want to hear what I have to say? Do I have anything unique or different to say? It's hilarious after hearing all of this that you might think that I struggle with that, and I struggle with it deeply. My autoimmune condition is that of the thyroid, and I think that it's no coincidence that it's in my throat and a metaphysical form of expression. And so it's my own journey. And that's why I love what I'm doing so much, is because I help give that gift to others. And it's what I want to help myself with.
Okay. What's one thing you're struggling with at the moment?
It's really articulating my full value and what I'm really bringing to the table. Like I said before, I have heavily branded myself around storytelling, and I think those that don't understand me very well just see things like the origin story as the whole thing that I do. And I'm working on encapsulating the full power of that and finding words and processes. And I'm struggling through it in a book right now to really capture what it is that's going on here.
What is the intended end outcome when you accomplish that?
It is, for those that I work with, being able to communicate from the stage on podcasts in a way that you show up deeply present. You can listen and share and become that martial art master of the mind, and not only be able to communicate to get results in your sales, but you have a new level of presence and navigation of your own life, that the biggest obstacles that are in your way suddenly are moved.
So why do you need to develop your personal brand in that area? Why would you not just go out and speak to people who already know you, for one thing? and then offer them something similar but different, they already know you, like you, trust you. You've helped them grow. I mean, if you've had the kind of effect that you've had on this podcast, then I imagine that those people will be receptive. I'm not entirely sure you really need to go through that painful exercise of rebranding. Is this something that you want to do because of the outcome, or because you think you need to do it, or it's a way of avoiding doing the real hard work?
That's a great question. I appreciate you bringing this back around. I think I am Debbie in this case, in my own way. And yeah, it's a matter of framing my programs and framing my purpose and communicating this better on sales calls. And I think for a long time, I would listen carefully and help people co-create these amazing origin stories that would create this dazzling experience. But again, it's how I conduct myself and really how I believe in myself. And so I really appreciate, and what I'm taking away from this is that the transformation for me is as close as I believe it is, and as easy of a shift as it is that I create with those that I work with.
Fantastic. Well, let's chat about that offline. How can people get hold of you?
My website is thestoryengine.co. You can find my podcast there. I also am active on LinkedIn. You can find me, Kyle Gray. You can either search Story or Utah. There's another Kyle Gray close to you called the Angel Whisperer, KyleGray.uk. Different person. I hope to have him on my show someday, but not me. Or Hey Kyle Gray, like Hey Kyle Gray on Instagram.
Excellent. Kyle Gray, thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcus. It has been an absolute pleasure going down this journey with you today.
So this is Marcus Kauke signing off once again from the Inquisitor podcast. If you found this useful and insightful, then please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Tag someone. If you are struggling with storytelling, with presenting, with your self-confidence on stage or in front of a group, then get in touch with Kyle, get in touch with me. Now, if on specifically you are formally an above average performer, but you've been struggling of late because the context has changed, you've been trained up in good systems like Sandler and Medic and Richardson and all of those things, but it's not working for you, then contact me. At the bottom of the blurb, there's a link to complete my selling aptitude test. If you complete that, you can grab half an hour with me. I'll give you warts and all feedback in terms of what your responses mean and how you're affecting your buyer's brain in terms of buyer safety. If they don't feel safe with you, they ain't buying. So if you want to grab half an hour with me for free, I'm not even going to sell you coaching. You have to ask me if you want to buy it. So in the meantime, stay safe and happy selling. Bye-bye.